Okay, so I'll just remind members and visitors of the need to switch off mobile phones and electronic devices. Agenda item 1, apologies. Has anybody got any apologies?
Trevor Clark. Trevor.
Okay, any others? No. Agenda item 2 is draft minutes of the previous meeting. The draft minutes of the meeting on the 24th of June are in the packs at page 5. So, any comments? Okay. Agenda item 3, the draft end of session report. At page 9 in the draft end of session report, summarising the work of the committees from the first, at page 9 is the draft end of session report. Summarising the work of the committee from the 1st of September 2013 to the 31st of August 2014. The intention is to publish each committee's report on the website at the end of September. The reports will not be published in hard copy. Members have any comments on the draft report? If not, agree to publish? Yep. Okay. Agenda item 4, review of topical questions, briefing from junior ministers. If I could draw your attention to the briefing paper at page 16 in the packs. As Hansard are recording this session, I would again remind members and visitors of the need to switch off all mobile phones and electronic devices. Thank you. You're very welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for attending. Ministers, as you know, the committee is carrying out a review of topical questions, and we thank you for attending to give evidence. I understand you're going to make some introductory remarks, after which we'll ask some questions. That's okay? Do you want to start?
Can I start then?
Yep, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, first of all, I want to thank the Chair for inviting us here to attend this meeting on the Committee on Procedures. We're very grateful for the opportunity to share with you and members of the committee the views of executive ministers to help inform your current review of topical questions. On receipt of the committee's request for evidence, we canvassed the opinions of executive ministers, and while we regret that it was not possible to provide the committee with written evidence in advance of today's meeting, we hope that our comments will be fully and accurately convey their views. We would also propose to provide the committee with a short paper setting out these views, and will arrange for our officials to do so following this meeting. As a general observation, the committee will be aware that ministers supported the introduction of topical questions. As can be evidenced from the range of issues raised as topical questions, the introduction of this new type of question has bridged the gap in the ability of members to raise with ministers issues that have arisen while they are still very current and genuinely topical, and ministers have welcomed this. And this is to the benefit of debate in the Chamber and of greater understanding of the work of departments, and must be considered therefore to be a positive development. We propose today to make some comments in which we will provide the views of the executive ministers, following which we'd be pleased to hear members' views and to respond to any questions that they may have. Concerning the operation of the system of topical questions, ministers have indicated that they are broadly satisfied with the procedural arrangements for such questions, and also supportive of the change to the order in which topical questions are now taken during question time. They feel that this change has been an improvement and would therefore support the retention of this sequencing arrangement. And in examining potential changes to the system of topical questions which might improve its operation, ministers have individually suggested a number of areas which the Procedures Committee may wish to consider. We would emphasise that these are individual rather than fully collective views, but as they represent ministers' actual experience of topical questions so far, we felt that these should be recorded. The first one is the definition of a topical question, and this relates to a suggestion that consideration be given to the introduction of an actual definition of what constitutes a topical question. The initiative to introduce topical questions was in large part to enable members to raise with ministers issues which had a greater degree of immediacy attached to them than the listed oral questions, with a longer lead-in time. In practice, it has been suggested that the topical questions posed by members can be at variance with this aspiration, with some displaying little by way of being topical and therefore indistinguishable from the ordinary oral questions which precede them during question time. It is therefore suggested that the committee might wish to give further consideration to the development and introduction of a specific definition of what a topical question actually is, involving an interventionist role by the Speaker when appropriate. This might ensure that the questions posed have a stronger focus on more immediate issues of current relevance, which have emerged in the immediate period preceding a question time session. The second one is in terms of overlap between oral and topical questions. And again, the questions being asked of ministers as ordinary orals, and then sometimes very similar questions are being posed immediately afterwards as a topical question. Ministers have noted a large degree of overlap in terms of some of the questions posed by members, and while Assembly standing orders and Speaker's rulings do not rule out the topical questions based on or supplementary to questions already asked as oral questions, it is considered that the Procedures Committee might also seek to examine and potentially review this practice to ensure the benefits of topical questions are fully realised. The third one is advance notification of topical questions. Our final comment relates to a suggestion that consideration be given to advance notification to ministers of the topics of upcoming topical questions, but obviously not the detail of the question itself. It is felt if that were to happen that ministers would be in a better place to provide more detailed and informative answers to members, which might serve to improve the overall effectiveness and impact of topical questions. I'm now going to hand over to Jonathan to do the second part.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd also like to express my thanks for the committee's invitation to attend today's meeting and for this opportunity to provide the committee with ministers' views on a number of specific issues that have been identified during the course of the review. These cover three main areas. The first concerns proposals to increase the amount of time allocated to topical questions within the overall 45 minutes set aside for oral questions, to allow more members to ask topical questions. In the allocation of time between orals and topical questions, it's on the question of the balance of time. A number of ministers indicated that they would either have a neutral view on such a proposal or would be content if such a change were to be introduced. However, other ministers are equally opposed to any move to alter the current balance, as they are not persuaded that there is a strong or pressing rationale for such a change to be made. Were such a change to be introduced, the Procedures Committee might also wish to consider how this might impact upon the ordinary oral questions facility. Any increase in the time set aside for topical questions would, by definition, reduce the amount of time available for members to ask ordinary oral questions. It might therefore be the case that consideration would need to be given to reducing the number of ordinary oral questions allowed to be tabled for ministers from the current 15 to a smaller number. Secondly, members asking supplementary questions. The committee raised the issue of allowing all members to ask supplementaries to topical questions. In response, the majority of ministers indicated that they would be content if such a change were to be introduced. However, the committee will have recognised that more members asking supplementaries to a question on a particular issue may well reduce the number of individual questions and therefore the variety of topics capable of being covered in a session. It has also been suggested that, as in many cases ministers are able to answer the topical questions fully in their initial response, consideration should be given to the value that supplementaries would actually add to the process. Restrictions on members asking topical questions. We have consulted with ministers on proposals to introduce restrictions on the ability of members of the same political party to ask topical questions of a minister. A number of observations were made which we would like to convey to the committee. Ministers expressed a variety of views on a partial restriction whereby members of the same party as the minister cannot ask the first question. A number have advised that they would either be content were such a limited change to be introduced, or that they would actively support such a change. However, strong opinion has been expressed by a significant number of ministers on this particular suggestion, and a number have advised that they are opposed to such a change. In doing so, they have expressed the view that such a move would serve to deny members from particular parties the opportunity to scrutinise and to hold all ministers to account on topical issues, and would place an unnecessary restriction upon the topical questions procedure. Ministers were broadly opposed to the proposal for a wider prohibition on fellow party members asking any topical questions of a minister from the same party. So, Chairman, in conclusion, it's clear that the introduction of topical questions has had a positive impact upon the business that has been conducted in the Chamber. It has enlivened question time. It's enhanced the challenge role of members who now have the facility to pose a question on issues while they are very current in a way that was not readily available to them in the past. That said, it is obvious that through the views expressed by ministers and the experience that has been gained through topical questions, having been in operation for an entire Assembly year, that this is still an evolving process, and we look forward to the committee's recommendation. Jennifer and I would be happy to respond to any questions you and the committee may have on the evidence that we have presented to you here today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, both ministers, for answering, I think, most of the questions that were there, but there may be some others. It's open to the floor. The committee.
Yeah,
Jim?
I suppose what you've had to say is pretty self-serving and predictable, but could I ask, why are some ministers precious about the idea of any prohibition on planted questions from their own colleagues?
Well, my understanding of it was that they felt that every member of the Assembly should be entitled to hold all ministers to account, and therefore to deny a party that ability would be to deny that individual MLA the ability to...
We already have the precedent in standing orders where in oral questions the first question cannot be from the same party as the minister. What's the argument against that modest extension to topical questions?
Well, I wouldn't say that there's a total argument or bias against it. I think that they're open to discussion on it, but I think that the reason was they didn't want to disenfranchise any member, just because, and obviously there's parties that have bigger membership than others in the Assembly, so they didn't want to prevent anyone asking the question.
But Standing Order 27 already imposes that disenfranchising, if you wish, in respect of the first question on orals. So I just don't understand why, if it's acceptable there, it wouldn't be acceptable in topicals.
No, your point's taken, and we can refer that
We can
back to them
reflect
again.
it back to the individual ministers. I presume that the MLA in question that couldn't ask the first question on a topical issue, and given that you shouldn't ask the same question twice, it would prevent that MLA from raising something of pertinence to their area or constituency or an area of interest to them, just because they happen to be from the same member of a party. But I take your point that it is there for oral questions.
Yeah, ministers. Alvin?
Thanks, Chair, and thank you very much for coming. I think you made some very useful points. Just in relation to topicality, have you any definition of what a topical question could be defined as?
Well, the learned member is a lawyer, as was the previous one, and I once asked for a definition once on a specific form of child abuse, only to be told by that definition of a crime as a definition by definition of 13 of your peers consider it to be a crime, and sometimes it's a definition as to whether the Speaker regards it as topical. It's an opportunity for topical questions, and essentially it should not be for where there is a long-term or an ongoing issue. It should essentially refer to something that is topical and on that day. There have been recent cases including questions to the Environment Minister on illegal dumping and questions to a number of ministers in the transfers of functions to the new councils. There's no doubt that those are important issues. The question might as readily have been asked as an ordinary oral question, as they concern topics which are ongoing by nature. So I think if that was taken, that it was, if a matter is ongoing by nature, it should sort of decline its currency in terms of the nature of its topicality.
Yeah, I think also, it has to be sort of an issue just before question time. I mean, if it's something that's current or topical, it has to be something that's become an issue just before question time, and not from maybe the last question time. The gap is something. Obviously, it would be hard to get an actual definition, but certainly something that would be topical of people's interests outside, and maybe something that has been sort of talked up, if you like, on newses or whatever, or even in somebody's constituency. But I just think that for the definition, that it needs to be something that is relevant and significant enough, just prior to question.
And you haven't made a stab at a definition yourselves?
Not really, no, we wouldn't do that on our own. I mean,
And really what you're saying is be very difficult to define.
of course it would, yeah.
Yeah.
I think what we have done in terms of, say, the key element of any topical question should be that it is of significant interest, which has emerged or has significantly evolved in the period immediately preceding a question time. We have also then given ideas, Chairman, that it shouldn't be seeking an update on policy. It should be something that is emerging and current. I don't think we want to get bogged down in time being wasted between the Speaker having to decide and arguments over whether something is current or not. It's going to be at the discretion of members. But the rule of thumb, as it were, is that it should deal with an issue of significant interest which has emerged or have been significantly evolved in the period coming up, as Jennifer says, immediately around the time of question time.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah.
Chair, yes, thanks. What's your view on other members being permitted to ask a supplementary?
I mean, I don't see any difficulty in that at all. I mean, I don't think that when I say other members, I don't see the difficulty in normal question time that happening, but the difficulty I would see in topical questions, which we get through very little, just given the time allocation for it. You've only got 15 minutes, where in the other ones you have a half an hour. So I think you would be very sort of pressed to get, a number of questions asked, and then it might be again it mightn't be something, because as you go on, you see it in ordinary question time, when someone's up and they're doing a supplementary and then there's another supplementary, it's almost repetitive sometimes, unless there's a particular issue that wants to get teased out. So I think that would, for me, would be the biggest difficulty that with other members coming in to ask it, that first of all the shortness of the time, and then secondly that the repetition might come in,
Well, thanks, Chair. What I'm thinking about is, and it's frustrating for me, sure for other members, is whenever somebody asks, or I ask a topical question, and you respond, then I don't get the opportunity to come back for you to further explain, or that, if you were agreeable, somebody else who was obviously interested could challenge your response to your question.
I think it's a balancing act. I support the member, Chairman. I think the majority of ministers that replied would support the widening out of the topical question right across the chamber. It has been noted, if I present the balanced argument, that on occasions when members have been invited to submit a supplementary, they haven't done so on the in other questions. And I think, secondly, if you do widen it out, you do run the risk of not getting as many topical questions in. But certainly the majority of ministers would support what Mr McCarthy has outlined.
Lord Morrow.
Okay.
Could I ask the junior ministers, just in relation to question time generally, normally the expectation would be that it's the highlight of the day. Do you think that's happening here?
It's a bit sort of, I mean, that would be giving you my personal view of that, as opposed to anything else. I think that sometimes you get questions during question time, and I've even experienced it myself, where people could have those in written form as opposed to oral form, because I think you're right. I think that you want to have something there where people are, it's first of all immediate, but it's significant. So I think that there can be cases there where maybe an oral question has come in, and I have to say, an odd topical question as well, that could be, in my opinion, could be answered in a written way, particularly if it's about a constituency issue, because you wouldn't be, you wouldn't have all that information, first of all, the answer at the back of your head, but also I think a more detailed sort of response might be needed in some constituency, like where facts and figures and that's concerned. So I think sometimes it loses its spontaneity whenever that happens. That's just my own view, by the way. It's nothing to do with.
No, thank you. And just put it, that wasn't. That's fine. And I don't expect you to give anybody else's view at the moment on the like of that. In relation to then the introduction of topical questions, to what extent do you feel that it has enhanced the Assembly?
I think that it has enhanced it because I think that members get an opportunity from one question time to the next to ask questions that have arisen or around issues of significance or issues of concern to people in the local communities that we represent. So I think that and also major political questions, because we all know that things can change from one day to the next in politics. And I think that it gives, in my opinion, it allows members to ask those questions when they wouldn't otherwise have a vehicle to do that. I think that's where topical questions is most advantageous.
And finally, Chair, and so therefore you do feel that ministers are genuinely really surprised at the questions that they're being asked on the floor of the House in topical questions?
I don't think any minister should be surprised if they're listening to what's currently on the news and listening to what's currently happening in people's lives. I think that if ministers as political representatives are tuned in to the political developments around them, then I think that they should naturally know the questions that would be of concern to members.
I think topical questions empowers the members. Obviously other questions are submitted in advance, and it's right that that be done so, because to do the level of research that's required to give an accurate answer, you need to have that preparation time. I think topical questions has significantly enhanced the interest of what occurs, and if we go by the old maxim, as Lord Morrow would know, a week is a long time in politics. It allows the more pressing cases to be made.
Thank you.
Barry?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Can I ask the ministers to comment on the point made in a written submission from the BBC? They're making the point that it would be a good idea to change the breakdown of regular and topical questions to a 50-50 basis. I suppose it's currently 2/3, 1/3, that 45-minute allocation. But there's some suggestion from BBC that it would certainly suit their agenda if it was broken down differently to a 50-50 basis.
I think it would suit everybody's. I think that there's generally a view in ministers that a 50-50 split would be good. I do have to say that without the ability to do the research on a specific and more in-depth, there's no way you can do that just in the period of time that you actually have. And there's a fairly evenly split among ministers in favour of what you have suggested there, Mr. McElduff. I think questions in advance allow for more depth of research to be undertaken, and therefore a more accurate and more quality answer to be given. But in terms of interest and immediacy and the relentless drive in a 24-hour news cycle that we're all living now in, that a 50-50 split actually could be quite interesting and encouraging.
Thank you. Could I just, Senior Ministers, while you're on that subject, what is the notion of advance notice? Are you talking about advance notice that morning? Are you talking about advance notice in line with what oral questions are at the moment? What are we talking about? What is your suggestion?
When you're talking about advance notice, a topical question, it has to be that morning. Because, something could be topical in the morning that wasn't topical the night before. So I think, in fairness to members, if something has arisen overnight or whatever, I think that it has to be. We're not suggesting the same sort of notice for oral questions, because members have to submit that. But certainly, some sort of notice. And the thing is, it's not just what it is to give a more sort of detailed answer, as opposed to, preparing ministers, I feel like, in terms of what's going to be asked. I think that it's just in terms of the detail, because if you're speaking and you're caught at something that maybe you don't know the detail of, then it's going to be a poor answer that minister's going to give in the chamber.
If I understand it, the request was that it should be topic the topic as opposed to the actual question.
Yeah, well, that's,
I think in
So
terms-
the area, yes, Liz.
I think in terms, Chairman, of the advance notice, it was, certainly an immediacy of notice. It was a minority view that was expressed from ministers that they would like advance notice. I think part of it is clarification to know just exactly what specific area is being looked at, because you can very quickly go on to one area that is not the actual question that's being asked, but it would really be submitted on the day to allow the fullest information to be given. Although I have to say that the concept of advance notice, and you're right, it is the topic, so we know just exactly that's definitely the area that's being looked at. But the idea of advance notice was given by a minority of the ministers that were involved.
Okay, thank you, ministers. Any more questions for the ministers? Do the ministers have anything else they want to add to that in terms of improvement to the process? I think I've covered everything.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks very much for attending. Thank you.
thanks, sir.
Okay, folks, we now have the views of the executive and some others. So it's open for discussion if people are happy enough to discuss the issues involved. Do you want me to start? I'll open up. So the last thing about advance might be the easiest one for us to deal with. Do members have a view of any advance notice?
I don't think there should be advance notice.
I would agree with you, Malcolm.
I agree with that.
I have to
I
say
think it would-
it's my own inclination.
It does, it just destroys what it was set up.
Okay, I thought that would be the easiest to do.
Yeah.
So we have practical unanimity in that. In terms of, then, let me open it up for some of the other stuff. For instance, the definition of topical. We've went through this ad nauseum in terms of this, but there is, from what I pick up, some notion that there might be guidance as opposed to a definition, because the speaker's ability to make a decision without being bogged down with an argument, which is what we don't want, points of order, process in the middle of question time, or that type of to and fro. Would the members have a view on that? Oh.
I think it would be extremely difficult to define this the way that the junior ministers have said, even about having something that is even up to 24 hours has happened in your area or has happened in general. I mean, if you've got a minister that is flying through the questions and get to even question 5 or 6, and it has to have been something that happened within the past, that morning or that evening before. I mean, and it might be all right, I suppose, if we had health questions where there seems to be abundance of things, or some other, but other ones there isn't. So, and every question has to be different. The next person can't ask the same vein of question. I think that's actually would make it very difficult for members.
Thank you, Paula. In fairness to the conversation, is there anybody who wants to argue against what Paula has said?
Just in relation to the topical question itself, is it in order for a member to ask a supplementary in their question to one that was asked prior to?
A supplementary in their question to you on a topical question that was asked prior? I don't know. We'll have to,
Who is on the list to ask the question?
It's never been done, but there's nothing in the rules to stop it or in the speaker's rulings.
It is an interesting thing, Lord Mayor, I think, to me anyway, because what was said earlier was about the repetition in topical questions in terms of what happened in oral questions, and it's nearly the same thing. So somebody, and this has happened, I've witnessed it myself, where there's a question come up which is quite important, or people seeing it as important in the orals, and someone followed it up with a different question, but however it was connected to that question. I'm not sure if you should disallow that, because sometimes it is that important.
Surely changing the running order was to avoid preempting the oral list. But once you've done the oral list, is there any reason why a member who hasn't got speaking on that subject can't pursue it further in a topic? No, I would have thought.
Well, and I think we were quite keen on allowing that to remain. The only reason I'm raising it, Jim, is because it moves into the question that you're asking. So if you're allowed to do that, if someone asks a topical question and someone else thinks, well, that wasn't particularly answered properly, then they can come in and it becomes a third question. It also leads, if I could, with respect, then move that into the issue around supplementaries. Because there's one way of dealing with supplementaries, the other way is that you actually have supplementaries. So if we could open up the floor maybe on the issue of supplementaries.
I quite like the idea of other people being allowed to ask supplementaries. I think sometimes at topicals it can be quite flat because it just ends so sharply, that question, that there isn't room for just a little bit more debate around the subject. You know, it just ends and then you want another question, and again, I don't know.
The problem
There's
is,
no time for that.
One at a time, folks. Go ahead, Tom.
No, I'm just saying I would fully support mine.
I would question it, because I think the practical effect would be to reduce the number of topical questions radically. If you look at oral questions, you will spend between 5 and 10 minutes on one question. That's because you do a round of the chamber on supplementaries. If you introduce the same in the topical, if you only kept it to 10 minutes, you make it 2 topicals done. I think that would kill it. I think part of the attraction of it is that it brings an unpredictability and it brings a variety of topics. If you multiply the number of supplementaries, then you're going to correspondingly reduce the number of questions.
Chair, I think that if you're going to, if you go down the road of topical, I don't think to allow a full round of supplementaries. I think, well, you're left with a start choice. You're going to have to extend the time, I think. But furthermore, I think that getting supplementary to a topical is good in principle, but I don't think it should go right round the house. I think maybe one other. Now, how that's all trashed out, who that one other should be, is
For my tuppence worth, I have to say I agree with Jim. The thing about topical questions is they're practically getting through 10 questions every time it's up. That's true. And this is only over 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. It allows a wider range of questions to be had. And I think, going back to Lord Marrow's point earlier, would you be allowed to ask, in other words, if somebody was interested enough that they would use their own question because they didn't think that a question was answered, then they do have that opportunity. It will be a different person. I again personally thought about, could you allow one extra, but I think your difficulty there is how do you select it? That becomes very difficult.
Chair, sorry for being late. First of all, it was another meeting. Surely the idea of the topicals was mainly from a constituency point of view, things that might arise in the constituency. So, in essence, the only people then that possibly would be looking for a supplementary might be, other people from that same constituency. Members from the same constituency might be the only people that might want to follow up on it.
I can stand corrected, but I understand that they are used most in constituency issues, but it can be, it doesn't have to be constituency. Yeah. So,
not necessarily, but mainly.
Anybody else? Anybody want to argue, if I could say, argue the other way, that maybe supplementaries should be allowed, because we're getting a sort of a consensus at least on one side of the chair.
I don't think supplementaries should be allowed in general.
Well, then I'm going to suggest that we move past that if people are happy enough where we're sitting in terms of supplementaries. Go ahead, Alvin.
Well, I'm just endorsing the point that's been expressed, but I do think you would use up far too much time.
Well, anybody come in at any time. I'm just trying to move it through the questions that we have in front of us, so as we have some sort of consensus, if that's possible. In terms of...
Before you go on, I was a bit disappointed in the response from the junior ministers to Lord Morrow's question. I mean, your question was, did they think it was livened the whole thing up or not? You didn't use those terms, but I knew what you meant. Enhanced. And in my opinion, it doesn't, it hasn't, it isn't. And if there was somebody come up with an idea that it could, we should support it. Is that what you were saying? Is that what you were trying to get at?
Yes, I mean, quite frankly, I don't, but maybe this is only me, I suspect it is only me, I don't think that question time is the big issue of the day anymore. And it should be.
Should be.
It should be.
Yeah.
Now, we then, Chair, we need to be looking at why is it not? What's killing it? What's making it not? I mean, we have to be honest here and look at the chamber at any time of question time. It's not overflowing. No. It's not now. I think it should be if it was all
More dynamic.
right and members would want to be going to the House at question time, but it doesn't seem to be that way to me anyway. It doesn't seem right.
Well, maybe the way to do that would be to totally exclude from topical questions and oral questions members of the party of the minister. Then it might be more.
You bring us smoothly on.
That's a very big step.
You bring us smoothly on to the next subject, and if I could say there's two issues, if I could give a small, I think it was in the paper somewhere, one of the difficulties with topicals is that because there's no supplementaries, people don't go down because they don't think they have an opportunity to supplementaries. But I would suggest that part of that problem actually lies with ourselves. I don't mean in this committee, I mean as Assembly members. Because if we're not asking questions which are genuinely topical, which are actually questions which our constituents in that are really interested in, then that's the issue. It's not the way you ask a question, in my opinion. It's only my opinion. But if you ask a question which is genuinely topical, then, although we do that in urgent orals, but that's when you get some interest. But Jim has brought it on to the other. There's two issues here, as I understand it. One is that it could be the first question. Should not be from a party member to whoever the minister's party is, and the other part of it is that there shouldn't be any at all. So the people want to. Jim's already opened up. Maybe he wants to continue on that.
Well, I suspect banning the same party MLAs from asking their minister would be a bridge too far. But I certainly think, and the Speaker makes the point in his letter, that it would be appropriate to align standing orders on oral questions with the standing orders on topicals, namely the first question must be from someone else. Like, I don't understand the logic. If you have that rule for orals, why you wouldn't have it for oral topicals?
Anyone else? There is I suppose if I could again just try and open up, there is a small out, and I think Jim describes there's a huge difference between blocking all members asking their party members who might be ministers. Questions at all, because that would block out quite a substantial number of people. And the first question, I suppose the only argument against it, in my head anyway, is that if it truly is topical, then anybody could be asking that question, and getting the first question in any of the situations, I mean, allows that person to be out front on it. But that's the only thing that strikes me about it. Anybody else on it?
Well, Chair, I think if you drill down into the suggestion that Jim has made here in relation to perhaps members from the minister's party not being permitted to ask a question, I think you would have the thing rightly stifled, because you would have the larger parties who would be effectively barred from participating in and I think it would not have the desired effect.
I recognise that. That's why I'm saying just restrict it to the first.
I think it'll drive it away, and it'll drive more people out of the house rather than bringing them in. And yeah, I don't have a problem with it in relation to the first question coming from. I mean, we discussed this before, and coming from the opposition or the opposite party anyway, but. I think that it really is down to the members at the end of the day. Do they want to make this work or not? That's it.
I just ask a technical question on it, because when it comes to questions to First and Deputy First Minister, they alternate. Therefore, is it a difficulty in terms of the way questions are picked, that if you decided that it is the first person, that it doesn't bar both parties, that it only bars one? But it's a technical question, maybe. I don't know if...
On any given day, it's just
any of our experts would have it.
It would be the expert on the ballot.
That is the problem, because we do it now for orals.
That's right.
Okay.
So if First Minister is up, the first question will not be from a member of the DUP. So that's just the way that the rota works within our system.
So it's not a difficulty, which is the main thing. Okay, any other views? We have had a couple. Anyone? I'm taking a bit, what I'm looking here is an argument against what Lord Morrow and Jim is saying. I'm not getting one.
Chair, just to have me say, anything that anybody could come up with that would liven the question period up would be a good thing, not only for us, but for the people that are watching in. Because I've heard it at home and in the street. What a boring hour and a half. You know what I mean? If anybody has any ideas.
Tell them how you felt then, too.
I mean, really, I think it would do the Assembly a power of good if we could liven that hour and a half up. Really?
Chair, make them all topicals. Cool.
We're going to come on that. We're going to come on that in a moment.
Just to check, Chair. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it is. I mean, that's only myself again. Are we afraid of the chairperson, as a speaker, whoever's in the chair? Because if I get up to challenge some of these people, maybe for the second time, you're going to be put down or threw out, and therefore there's a reluctance to liven the place up. Do you understand what I mean? I mean, you look at Westminster. Sure, it's it's exciting. It's and the speaker takes it.
Is he exaggerating that?
That's my opinion.
Sorry, Ken. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say from the Speaker's responses, I think he's already indicated that he would be keen for a lively debate in questions.
Well, let's try him sometime, or whoever it is, at an early date. See who gets through out first.
You're up for it. All right.
I think there's a role for outreach section of the Assembly to market question time as well, because I witnessed that at the Scottish Parliament, where particularly First Minister's question time was a big event, but it was marketed to the people. Is there any attempt made to reach, civic society or students at third level education who are studying politics, that they might get an experience of question time, might put a bit of additional pressure on the ministers, to assist in the project of making it interesting.
I'm taking it from where we are at the minute in terms of the party members that no one's arguing against the first question being put in line with the oral practice of the oral questions, but not in terms of the rest of them. There is an issue now. If I could I'm just trying to move it on another wee bit in terms of the balance, which George was talking about there. In terms of the balance of time. There were a number of arguments given to my memory, points given by the junior ministers, one of which is that the balance is okay as it sits now, and others saying that it could change. I think BBC wants to change to 50-50, and others, I think there's one in there which says 20 minutes versus 25 minutes. In other words, moving topicals up another 5 minutes, or leaving as it is. So that's out on the floor. Bearing in mind at points made earlier, we're now not dealing with supplementary, people have agreed we're not dealing with supplementary, so you are talking about 10 questions as it sits. Usually, most of them get done. That would be extended to whatever number of questions, and likewise, you have a contraction of orals. So, anyone?
First of all, Chair, I don't think it should be extended to 50-50. However, I have an open mind on whether the time should be extended or not. I could maybe be convinced on that one, but I don't think that the going 50-50 is the way forward.
Anybody else?
Chair, I think the 30-15 is actually working. And you made a comment there yourself as Chair that sometimes you can get through as many as 10 questions in topicals because there's one supplementary. So to me, it's working. There's something happening here that isn't broken.
Chair, I just want to make a point. We have experience, obviously, of topical questions, but I don't think that period of time has been substantial enough to come to any serious conclusions. I think we're being premature if we start, interfering now. I think let the hair sit for a while let's come back to it. I'm not saying we don't look at it again, but let's come back to it in a few months' time and see. You know, it's arbitrary whether it's 20 minutes or 25 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever, you know. But I do think topical questions have been working. That's my view. I think they're interesting, sharper, more focused. And I think the fact that there's one supplementary really does help the whole process.
Okay,
Chair, I would tend to agree.
fair enough. Does anybody want to argue against? Basically what Alvin, Barry and George are saying is let's chat it a bit further and we can come back to this subject at a later point. Okay. I'm just looking to my left or right. Have we covered all the questions in terms of that? And maybe we can get a summary of where we're at. In terms of I presume we don't need to make a decision until the next. I understand the junior ministers are sending us a note. We haven't got a note, we've only got the conversation up to now. So we can put that until the evidence is there. Okay, are people happy enough? We can move on. We'll come back to a summary of what we've agreed. There's some consensus on that. Great. Okay, agenda item 5, the inquiry into the Attorney General's participation in proceedings of the Assembly. I'm just going to ask, because I notice it's 10 to 2 or quarter to 2 in between.
Question time soon.
Question time soon, and this is a subject which we continue to return to and need to return to. I don't think we're going to get sorted out in 10 minutes.
No.
Are people happy enough that we put it off to the next meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not too sure the Attorney General will be too happy, but I think that's all we can do in the few minutes we have left.
Is he the one that's eager to come?
Again, I'm looking for some advice that we're going to be able to get through the public relations procedures, do you think? Do you want to have a go? Okay. Okay, at the last meeting, it's agenda item 6, folks. It's at the last meeting, Maria McMahon gave us a briefing on her public petition project. Hello again. And we agreed to give further consideration to this matter today. As public petition procedures is in our forward work programme, we agreed to get some research on the e-petition systems and other legislators, and you'll find the research paper at page 66 in your packs. So do members have any comments on the paper? And Ray McCaffrey's here if we have any questions.
Chair, are you invited to comment, Chair?
I am indeed, yeah.
Well, I just think we seem to be alone, really, in the fact that we do not have an e-petition mechanism for this Assembly. I think we should have that. And I think as a consequence, if we do establish that, I think we in a sense, raise petitions to a higher level because they're more accessible, it's more immediate for people, and I think it could become something that would be quite popular. I think, and I've said this before in this committee, I think whenever petitions are presented to the Assembly, tend to be lost in the woodwork, and we need to have some system whereby we keep an eye on petitions as they work their way through the governmental system. And I think one way of doing that is to have a committee, maybe this committee, I don't know, some committee that looks at petitions as they come in and traces their journey through the system, and possibly decide that a petition is of sufficient importance that you actually have a debate on the petition or the substance of the petition, and that the committee, whatever committee is looking at it, determines that and says, look, we think this is an important issue, let's have a debate on it.
Any other comments?
Yeah, just on Alvin's point that present petitions get lost in the woodwork, I must say that was my assumption. But after our last discussion, I tabled a series of questions to each minister asking what they'd done about each petition. And I was surprised to discover the amount of engagement, follow-up engagement there'd been between most departments and petitioners. So my assumption, like yours, that it was just all over in a moment and forgotten about, isn't exactly borne out if you look at some of the answers.
But it's not a visible process.
No,
That's the point, Chair.
no, it's not at all visible.
Okay, anybody else? Yes. Well, unless somebody's going to argue against it, Maria gave us quite a comprehensive rundown and representation the last time. We have the information in front of us. It could be a suggestion. I'm not sure if it's exactly the same as Alban was saying, but that we do take it forward and do a review into publication procedures. I presume at some stage we will want other submissions to it and that. So if, and I'm looking to the left or right to see if this is the way to proceed, that we do take it forward as a review.
I support that.
Is that fair enough?
Agreed?
Yeah.
Okay. It says here the clerk will advise Maria, the committee wishes to receive her. I think she now knows. You're very welcome, Maria. Agenda item 7, forward work programme at page 75 is a forward work programme up to November. It is worth noting that if we continue with our monthly meetings, there will only be 16 meetings left in this mandate. So are members content with the forward work programme, which we've just added to? Okay. So that'll be added to the work programme as well. Agenda item 8, the correspondence. There are 3 pieces of correspondence. At page 77 is a memo from Damien Martin, Clerk Assistant, in relation to the administration of an oath to witnesses, as set out in Standing Order 71. The Committee for Social Development recently administered an oath to witnesses, and legal advice received by the committee highlighted that the wording for affirmations in Standing Order 71 may not be in line with Section 6 of the Oaths Act 1978. So we would need to request our own legal advice on this issue. So if members are content, we can ask the clerk to obtain this and consider the matter further on receipt of the advice.
Great.
At page 78 is an email from a plenary clerk in the National Assembly for Wales. They are producing a bulletin on procedural issues in other parliaments and assemblies, and we're keen to obtain some information on the background to our new standing order, which provides for an exceptional further consideration stage, which members will remember we put through recently. So are members content that the clerk provide this information? Great. Any other business? Are there any items? This is agenda item 10, date and time next meeting. Next meeting will be here in this room 29 on the 21st of October at 1 p.m. And thank you for